hear the sound of my own voice. It's because I'm hoping that this is a discussion and that I want to make sure I hear your points as clearly as possible. So yeah. Howdy, folks. You should know me by now. I'm our workforce data analyst at the agency. And I'm here to talk about exploring resident engagement. I hope this is the first of many meetings, or maybe not many meetings, but some more meetings. And the agenda for today is we're gonna review some data, and then we're gonna talk about it. So first thing I want to stress is we're here to solve a mystery. We're not here to find a culprit. So this is not about trying to find out who made what mistake and why they should be fired. This is 100% about we're trying to understand what's going on in our agency and find ways to make it better. And trust me, I do not have the power to do any of that anyway. All right. So first, the mystery that we're trying to solve here is right here. So this is a plot of the number of center visits by year for our combined ECC, EFCC, and Northwest Career Center as well. And each of those colors represents a different year, spanning between July, August, September, October through November. So on the top, you can see that for those 5 months, we generally see between 3,000 to 4,000 folks on any 1 month. That's not how many folks we see, that's the unique number of visits we get, so people can come back. Whereas when you look down in 2021, we see that our number is well below what it was, where it was pre-pandemic. If anyone's gonna ask why not 2020, our centers weren't open, it would just be zero across the board. So these are in-person visits in our centers during this period of time, of July through November for each of these years. And of particular interest is why we see such a huge drop in 2021 compared to where we were beforehand. Some pretty obvious answers, of course, but I would like to think of them as there are many answers to this. That's not just one reason. So my question for you folks is, why y'all think so?
Yeah, I'll jump out first. Well, I'll defer to others and then I'll come back. So if others have thoughts.
So you're saying, other than COVID, what other reasons?
Yeah, obviously COVID's a big part of it, right? But we don't have to vote or anything, but anybody here did any travel during this time? Did anybody here, see family, have a holiday, do lots of stuff during these 5 months that suggests that you were somewhat comfortable being in person in places with other people? And even if you were masked and vaccinated, nonetheless, we probably all took, we'll call them risks, even if they weren't that risky at the time. So COVID may not be enough, is my point.
I think because of the Roe and Reese sessions were virtual.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're going to talk more about that.
I think because, we were closed, you alluded to it earlier, we were closed for, 16, 18 months. Customers found out another way to access the services that they normally would in our centers. So in the way that we kind of came back was a little disjointed. We were back open and then we weren't, and then it was just a lot of stop and go. So I think there was a little confusion probably amongst customers, and they had already found other places to go that might have been closer or easier for them to access the services that they normally would here.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about non-MOED places, right, Antonio?
Exactly. Places
Mm-hmm.
like Pratt, other smaller shops.
Gotcha.
And I would also add to, I don't know, Christy, if you said this in your statement about Reese and Rowe, is that, they didn't come back in person. They're still providing services virtually, but they're not providing that complete referral into the workforce center. That could be part of the problem as well, is that although they continue to deliver virtual services, they're not selling the fact that we are in person and they can come to our workforce centers.
Yes, and just to add to that, what Brenda is saying, the natural connection when we were in the center, they would physically do that workshop and then had a mandate to do 2 additional workshops, and usually the centers was used to meet that requirement for unemployment. I think we also should look at, we lost a huge pool of people who are not using workforce services right now because of the industries that closed down. So we're not helping them. They were making more money receiving unemployment until that trickled lower and lower. So I think we're at the brink of seeing more activity at the center level, but there are reasons for this drop.
I think the other thing is in 18 and 19, those are pre-pandemic, and what they represent is a full complement of partners in the centers. After 2020 and 2021, all of the partners never came back to the centers, and so some of the traffic also didn't come back to the centers because of that reason. Couple partners just to lift up. Child support was one. BCCC is another. And I went back and I looked at some of the child support numbers pre-pandemic. That represented almost 1,500 visits between East Side and Northwest. I shouldn't say visits, 1,500 people.
I'm just brainstorming along with all of you, but one possibility is we're all different. I mean, like I'm just speaking for myself. Like I do go out. I'm not hiding in my basement, but I don't go out as much. I don't do. There's things that I choose to do in person, but there's a lot of things that I prefer not to do in person that I was doing in 2018, 2019. So I'm just guessing that other people are like that. And that will contribute. It may not be the thing, but
yeah, I would also say pre-pandemic we were doing 2 recruitments per month minimum, and recruitments always drove traffic to the center. And I think even now when we do our recruitments, we're not doing recruitments to the same scale. We're trying to at least manage the numbers, but I think whenever there's a recruitment, we see pretty good participation. We see pretty good, a steady traffic coming for those recruitment events.
I'm loving all these theories, and some of these we're going to explore today. Other ones of these, I'm going to talk with Patty about how we can explore them with data in the future. Are there any other thoughts before I kind of go into my own exploration of this question as well?
keep on keeping
All right. So,
I have one more.
so
I do
go
have
for
one
it, Brenda.
We're not serving the job seeker market is totally different now. There's so many jobs out there right now and so many choices that, people don't necessarily need to come through us to get to a job. So while we are only catering to job seekers that need additional training, that need diplomas, that have issues or criminal backgrounds, there are job seekers out there that we're not tapping into, and it could be the high skilled job seekers, it could be the college graduates, the youth that are finishing high school. So there's a lot of applicant pools that we're possibly not reaching because either we're not marketing ourselves in the right way or they're not aware of our services. And it could be because they're high level, they can do their own resumes, they could do their own, job search. But we do provide a service. And for those that are transitioning from one area, from one field to another, they could definitely benefit from our training services or training occupational skills training opportunities. And
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
As well as around the marketing piece, marketing, promotion, having our name out there. That, not to say that it has a drastic change or shift But I think our marketing, because we had a gap in our communications department, I've heard from various vendors, people in the community that I've spoken with that didn't even know that the agency, the services were even available. So I think that could speak to not necessarily the drop, but the lack of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of good stuff. I would love to explore each and every one of these. I'm going to explore some of these now. So, and as I said, I'll talk with Patty to explore some of these later to see how we can understand, the data behind some of these theories to see which ones have legs and which ones may not. So for the rest of this session, I'm going to refer to things in a red box as the period between July 21 to November 21. So you're going to see more graphs. I'm going to put in red boxes the period that we're looking at here in those graphs, just to be clear about, what are we talking about for these months. For example, some folks might say, well, maybe fewer folks are looking for jobs, right? That could be part of it. There's just fewer job seekers. However, so I have a plot here of the total unemployed population for Baltimore City, and this runs 10 years. And that red box all the way on the right is the period of time we're looking at. From what you can see, about 1,600 folks as of July 2021, almost 1,700 were looking for jobs almost 1,700 folks were looking for jobs as of November 2021, and compared to that to about 1,400 pre-pandemic. So we've got more people who are looking for jobs, and when you're unemployed, the definition of unemployed is you're actively seeking for work as well. That's part of the definition. If you stop seeking work, if you're just sitting it out, then you're not technically unemployed, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't count you. So these are people who said they were active job seekers during this period. So we have more need still, despite some recovery since the start of the pandemic, but we still have more need now than we did before in those 2 years before 2018 and 2019. Similarly, some folks, we have a concern. COVID's bad. It's scary. People don't want to go to places in person, and that's not wrong. That is obviously going to be at play here. But here I have a picture of the hospitalizations for Baltimore City for COVID during the periods of time since the start of the pandemic. And you can see in the red box is actually relatively a low point for the pandemic, the place where we might have felt more comfortable, some of the post-vaccination benefits that we got, but pre-Omicron. And so, is it enough to explain a drop? Yes. Is it enough to explain an 80% drop in client center visits? I'm going to lean towards no. So another theory, maybe we're seeing as many clients as before, right? We're helping as many folks. We're just doing it virtually now, right? We definitely did do a great job shifting between in-person to virtual client assistance during the pandemic. But if you look over here, this is a picture of the number of unique clients that were served by month. And so served as in having a service in MWE that began that month. What you can see is that we kind of have relatively stable line between 2016 to 2019, maybe slight declines in 2019, it's not really clear. But then 2020 pops up, we get a huge hump. And then when 2020 shows around, we see, a decline compared to prior years. And those declines, you can kind of see they're especially not pronounced, but you can see they are long lasting during the period of July to November 2021 when the centers were open. And we actually served less people then than we were serving during some of the pandemic times. And that's unique clients.
Hey, John,
Go for it.
I'm just wondering if some of this, when we look at trends over the years, looking at 2019, where it starts to go down, some of that I'm wondering if it has to do with the economy, because the economy was good. And so when the economy is good, the labor force is going to shrink. And when we look at the pandemic in 20, the numbers went up. However, more people did not come back to the labor force because of some of their concerns about whatever their concerns are. And so I'm wondering if that's more of what we're seeing than what it looks like in 2019, where there was less people in the labor force. You would think with when the economy is bad due to COVID, and uh, my theory is some of those folks never came back to the labor force because of whatever reasons there are, and I think we're probably still seeing that, some of that you know, to this point.
Yeah, so you're not wrong that the labor force did shrink a bit during COVID. Part of that is due to early retirements. Part of that is due to people's natural discomfort with, going back to work, especially those with disabilities or immunocompromised. And part of that is due to the fact that people just literally pass away. And so we have just less folks. And that can explain some, the strength of the economy can explain how many people show up. You're not wrong. And, but I guess the point I was trying to make previously is that we still see higher unemployment here recent times in the past year than we saw pre-pandemic. And so the labor force, even if the labor force has shrank, the number of people seeking jobs, which is really the pool of people that I think our centers are trying to, assist and recruit from, that has grown from where it was pre-pandemic. Though it was also at a nadir, a low point in 2019 for the past 10 years. So that could explain also some of the drop that we see, the little tiny bit of drop we're seeing in clients here. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So I think
makes perfect sense. And I'm just wondering, with the number of people that might be receiving unemployment insurance, I'm just wondering if a percentage of those folks, even though they're supposed to do a work search, are they truly looking for work at this point? And if that's some of what we're seeing as well.
And
Sure.
that's my contention. Yes, thank you, Craig. That was what I was trying to inject. Although the numbers look like there are more people who are available to look for work, and because they're more on unemployment, this is, to me, just anecdotal. No one is really actually counting those who are just doing it to go through the methods. They're not using the Career Center because they're not really truly job searching, even though they're in that number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that, and they're going to show up as part of this. The thing I want to note is expanded UI ended in September, so folks are receiving unemployment, but they're receiving the same unemployment they got pre-pandemic come September, October, and November, and so we're still seeing the declines happening then. And in fact, what you're seeing is lower engagement in those 3 months if you look at the last 3 months, and that could be that group of people you talked about who are only engaging as a result of being on UI. But then that means that that just means there's an even smaller pool of people that are actually here to engage with us for other reasons. And that's the question I have, which is, why is that pool smaller now than it was in 2019, in 2018, et cetera, right?
And additionally, one quick question, John. This number, looking from July to November, virtual services, is it definitely inclusive of the Rowe and Reese workshop?
It is. This includes Rowe Reese folks and non-Rowe and Reese folks. So I'm actually going to do a breakout of these two groups coming soon. So y'all are getting ahead of me because you're thinking the same direction I am, which is a good thing. So I'm going to move forward just because I might be answering some of your questions in the next two slides. Yeah. So as we said, unique client served is below pre-pandemic levels. And the question, that we were kind of getting at is, what's this big hump here? And we were talking about Rowe and Reese. So we all know that Rowe and Reese is a requirement for UI benefits, that they were shifted to virtual during the pandemic. We've talked about that. And so I said, okay, well, let's look at these clients and compare clients who were part of Rowe and Reese with clients who were not. And here's the same plot where red are people who are not Rowan Recy clients and blue are people who are Rowan Recy clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what we can see is actually a trend that seems to actually predate COVID, right? Which is that we're seeing a sort of decline in non-Rowan Recy clients over time, at the same time as we're seeing an increase in Rowan Recy clients over time. And that one, and as I said, the pandemic obviously affects things significantly, but we're actually seeing, you can kind of see that happening in 2019. I did the math, and about every year our average monthly visitors dropped by about 100. So yeah, that is a sign that folks who aren't coming to our centers for services, who are coming to our centers for services beyond Rowan Recy, are declining. Part of that, I'm going to just jump to the next slide, is that when you look at, go ahead.
Can we, before you go to that slide, can we go back?
Go for it.
And so again, just looking at 2019 and the way that we track the different partner traffic to the center, and again, I go back to using child support as an example. We had a retirement, and so we lost that person that was outstationed in the centers, and therefore we lost the level of traffic that person would see coming to both East Side and Northwest. And again, I'm just using one partner as an example, and I think we cannot underestimate the value of the partners being in the centers and the traffic that comes to the centers for some of our partner services. And so I think we have some of that going on starting in 2019, where we started to see some of the drop in traffic. Also, we had some of our second chance partners who participated in the one stop, and then they started to not come back to the one stop, either for different reasons that we don't have to talk about here. But so I think there's some explanation to some of this related to the partners that participated in the centers, the partners that had staff on site in the centers that we started to lose in 2019, which impacted some of the traffic.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that. I'm going to talk with Patty about ways we could explore the impact of a partner leaving on these kinds of things, and we might talk with you more about like dates as to when those things happened. The
Right.
one thing I do want to note is that this trend is apparent. Go ahead.
If I could, just one last point that I think is really important, and this is about the MWE. There's only two partners that use MWE, Title I and Title III. Our other partners don't use MWE, so it's not going to show up in MWE. And for an example, when Doors refers a customer to the one stop, they're going to register in the Maryland Workforce Exchange, and it's going to show up under Title III. And if they get referred to Title I, it might show up, but otherwise it's not going to show up in that a partner made this referral for services. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, and so I can see why that wouldn't be reflected in this data, which, as I said, I'll talk with Patty about how we can explore it more. The one thing I wanted to acknowledge is that this trend that we're talking about predates 2019 too. It's actually, when I did the math, the drop starts from 2016 onward. I mean, it could go earlier, I just didn't pull data earlier. And so there could be other partners along the way, and we'll explore it. But child support alone doesn't explain the trend, because I actually ran the trend just to say, okay, what if I took out 2020 and 2021? Then it still started from 2016 forward.
Hey, John.
I just want to,
Yeah.
John, call your attention to time. So we're at
Yeah, I see that.
time. We're going to keep going a little bit, but just be aware that it is, folks are going to disappear on us.
Gotcha. I'm going to quickly hop to the next slide then. Yep, go ahead, Antonio.
One other thing before you move, I'm sorry. If you can also include in your request to Patty, if she can look at ETO, because I know Northwest, even prior to me getting there, they really didn't use MWE outside of WIOA customers to record services. Typically, the focus is on ETO because we're reporting to DPSCS from that system. So
Gotcha.
that's probably I would imagine that you might find a good number of folks that are only have services in ETO and not in MWE.
Gotcha. And just from my understanding, Antonio, is there any reason why ETO, should data entry in ETO be consistent through 2016? Like there shouldn't be drops or gains in ETO entry between that time, right?
Drops. I believe there was a drop in 2018 from the last time I looked back from the last few years, but I don't think there's a drastic drop.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, yeah, okay. I'll talk with Patty about ETO. So I'm going to keep going to the next two slides just because this one explains a little bit more about that row-RISI relationship. So what I did is I said, okay, if a client shows up one day and then within the next 2 months they receive another service, I'm going to consider them a returning client. I know some folks have services that might, extend multiple days and they may not get entry on that, but it's fair across the board when I'm doing comparisons between two groups of people. And what I found is that our clients returned more who were non-row-RISI clients in 2016, and then we've seen a decline in the rate of return, where folks are showing up less after that first visit who are non-row-RISI clients. Conversely, our row-RISI clients are showing up more, where if they get one service one day, within the next 2 months, they're more likely to get a service than they were, let's say, in 2016. So that's going to affect some of those numbers, right? Because the same person can show up multiple months as a unique client that month. And that explains a little bit of what's going on. And then there's a conversation, of course, to be had. Why is it that our non-row-RISI clients are returning less, right, compared to our row-RISI clients? And I don't have an answer. That's the end of my exploration. But my next slide is literally just saying.
Before we move.
What question? Okay.
Before we move in, and we've been hearing some of this, and we actually had a conversation with the LEA, and so as Diane mentioned earlier, they do have a requirement, and that is, I think is it RISI? No, it's Row that has a requirement, right? That they have to get 2 services.
It's RISI.
RISI, they have to get 2 services. Row, they don't. And so with Row, once they satisfy their reemployment workshop, those folks can take off. Where we try and engage them in additional service, it's not a requirement. With RISI, it is. But what we've been seeing is they've been getting those services in other jurisdictions because it's all virtual. And what we're trying to do is get them to drive that traffic back into the local area. Now, and this is not only in Baltimore, it's happening in other jurisdictions as well. So this is one of the things that we're seeing is that people might be getting additional services, but they're not necessarily in the local area where those residents live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, my Google Home's making reminders.
So I'm
I can't.
For John.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just real quick, John. I'm wondering if we can unpack some of this a little bit more and understand what the services are that they're receiving that second and third, what that service is, and if possible, whether that service was provided by Title III or Title I.
Sure. And that's for the row receipt clients or the non-row receipt clients that you're most
That would
interested?
be
Because it sounds like you're talking about row receipt folks.
right, right.
Hmm. Sure. I can explore what the second and third services look like. It's, just to be clear, it's a mishmash, right? I looked into it a little bit. I didn't get an incredibly clear pattern. Basically, the second and third services are more often look like the first service, right? It's just the most common service is more often the second and third service. But I'll see if I can find things that look unique in that data as well.
And can we do that for the non-row and receipt folks as well, you think?
For sure. For sure.
And I say
Happily.
that because I say that because the question always for me is, did someone come to the center for a service that we don't provide, and that's the reason they didn't come back?
Hmm. Yeah. And that makes sense. I guess the conversation I have here is that we're seeing a trend over time, which is how can we explain the fact that things have dropped over time, not just explain the fact that things are what they are, right? Because confusion about what we do, that's going to happen every year, right? But the question of what made this, these last couple of years different in making folks return less often, that's something that I think we can explore with more clarity as well.
Let me just jump in for a second, because again, being aware of time. So here's where I suggest we go with this. And it's, John, if you could send this PowerPoint out to everyone, that would be great. I think in our individual and collective heads, right? It's like, do you / we think that this data more or less is telling us that we're serving fewer people? Or do you think, well, I'm not convinced. I think we might be serving in the range of the same number of people, but we're missing some chunks of data, or something's not happening that's about to change again, because we can't change the past. This is not about how do we get November numbers up? That's not what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to actually predict the future, which is the hardest part, right? And if it's telling us, we want to make sure that we're diagnosing the situation correctly. So if at the heart of this, it's like, hey, I've looked at this data, this is what I think we need to, this is where I think we need to explore more in our own data, or start collecting data to tell us more about, are we seeing virtually plus in person the same number of people, more or less? That's what we need to do. Or you come to the conclusion, and again, maybe you're not ready to make a conclusion, and we're not really asking you to make a conclusion today, but no, I think, imperfect as it may be, the general trend here is we're not serving as many people. And if that's the trend, then that to me is sort of like decision one, or thought process one. And if it's fewer people, again, is it just coming back soon as we open more, as we get our communications team now is back in the fold and all of this kind of good stuff? Or is the world different? Is it that, people, pandemic or no, don't feel that, we've changed how we acquire things and interact. There's other workforce providers out there, and we need to think a little bit differently. We're not shutting our doors. Let's just be clear. That's not the point here, right? It's we're always about how do we help people. So how do we make sure that we're helping as many people with the quality services that we can? So, just think about that. Again, gets back to that, shower, exercise, football game thing, whatever it is we do. John, I don't know, or if others want to weigh in about, process. I don't know if we want to send around a few questions, broad ones. I don't know how you want to sort of wrap this.
Yep.
You got something.
Yeah, my next slide was just, asking exactly this thing, right? What are the questions that you guys have about this, age performance, otherwise, And as it comes to your questions, I just want you to be conscious. There's questions you might have and questions that are explorable with available data, staff, and knowledge. If I spend all my time talking, it's the best way to get everyone to roll their eyes, and then we stop having these meetings because I want to hear from y'all. If y'all start sending me questions like, well, maybe just people feel different, that's fair. I just can't really, I don't have data for that. And so that's the best way to get everyone to shrug, and then we stop having these meetings. And alternatively, if we look at this middle of the overlap of stuff I can explore and questions that you have, that's really the place we're going to get a solution. And for me, it's a win-win either way, because either I don't have to do this meeting or we get some help for our clients. But I hope for you all that your goal is the middle one. So next steps, you guys tell me.
Our goal is the middle one. I'm going to answer that one. I just want to amend your last slide because it can also be available. It can be data we don't have, but we could start collecting. You know, if there's something, if there's a piece of information that you all think could be survey information too, whatever, like, again, we can't go back in time, but we can start saying, let's do this thing differently for 3 months. Let's ask everyone a question or whatever it is. I'll throw that one on the table as well, but then I'll defer to the others.
Mm-hmm.
We can go ahead, Greg.
No, you go.
The biggest thing for me would be if we can, and I know we may not have access to this data, but if we can figure out other providers in the area, if their traffic has increased during the same amount of time that we're believing that ours has decreased, other localities, if their traffic has, if they kind of see the same trend, like I think that will be helpful to look at to know if it's a trend across the board for everyone or if it's just us that's seeing this trend. And again, I'm not sure if we can get access to data like that or traffic data, but it'd be helpful if we could.
There's a chance that I can through MWE. It looks like sometimes they accidentally let me get that information. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but if the system doesn't stop me, then I don't think it's against the rules. So I'll give it a go.
And I think for me, and from what I understand, reemployment workshops might resume in March in some kind of hybrid approach. And it's how do we, and by the way, John, my ask would be if you could disconnect Row and Reese and just have those as two separate data tracks instead of combining that data, because one has certain requirements that the other one doesn't. And so for me, the question would be, how do we engage the reemployment folks differently than what we've done in the past so that we have better uptick in them engaging in center services? And again, that might be, are we offering the right mix of services, or are we missing something that people really value and they're going someplace else to get it?
Yeah, I hear that. And I can try to split them up. The one thing I just really want to stress this. The places we're seeing the most declines in returnees is in the non-REFI category, right? And so, of course, I want to be able to serve these REFI clients better, get them to the centers, get them services. But I do want to stress that there is something happening for the other folks that is worth looking into as well.
John, I also want to make one suggestion is how many customers are driving self-service services, those pre-100 services. How many customers are we seeing that, are using the system effectively and they're driving their own work searches and, all those show up under the 100 category services. So what kind of traffic are we seeing there other than just registering in the system?
Totally. I can try to pull those numbers for the local area.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And John, just for clarity, did you look at services only assigned to staff, or did you look at all services?
To my understanding, if it's a service that's associated with our local area that wasn't a self-service, it's included.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was 100s and above. It didn't include any of the 0 services.
Yeah, I got rid of the zeros. Yeah.
I think this would be problematic, but it would be interesting to look at hub data, see if there's, is traffic going up or down there. The reason it's challenging though is because we changed how the hubs work. We have half-time staff, and we had full-time staff. Obviously, we have the pandemic, but I don't know if there's something there or not to poke at.
Yeah, I pulled prior hub data in like 2018, 2019 for an analysis, I think, to see if that change made a difference. And the biggest thing I found is that we just coded more information than we used to not code. And so it's sort of hard to do any comparisons because it seemed like the gain was in our ability to enter information MWE and not necessarily in the outcomes that we saw. So it would make it hard to use that as a comparison because it'll be a false trend, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep people. John, if you wouldn't mind sending around the PowerPoint, y'all don't be shy though. As you look at it, as you think about it, John, I'm gonna request it for you, but feel free to send John and Patty, hey, can you look at this or that, or does this include this or that, and then I'll go ahead and schedule another session for us to chew on this some more and try and say, what do we want to do? What do we want to sort of commit to? Again, based on where we're sitting with this. Again, is it a marketing thing? Is it a make sure we're improving the quality? Is it a need to get out in the community more? Is it just pandemic? What? I think that sort of leads to what should we do next to see if it makes a difference.
And Jason, I know I joined late, but the fact that the partners have not been in the last year, I think plays a big part in this as well. And the traffic that they drive, they may be coming in to see a partner, but because they're there, they do some other workforce service that otherwise they would not have come into our center for. So I don't know how we could look at that. John and I have had conversations about that, but it's just something to chew on.
Friend Mr. Lewis made that point, but we appreciate it. All right, well, no point. Oh, yeah, okay. Folks keep coming with the traffic. That's okay. I mean the chats. All right, well.
You think it's over? We had one more thing and one more thing. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All right, well, we have recorded this session. You can watch it again. And again, John will send around the PowerPoint. Thank you all. John, I really appreciate it. Patty, I appreciate you guys putting this together. It's incredible. Even no matter where this goes, this is, again, what we want to be doing as an agency is really, chewing on this information and trying to get to what we can learn and do better. So thank you all. Thank you all for being a part of it.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, folks.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.